Hello again. Pro-democracy protesters have launched 2 more days of civil disobedience against Sudan's military coup. The move comes after Arab League mediators arrived in Khartoum to try and defuse the crisis. The calls were spearheaded by the Sudanese Professional Association, an umbrella of trade unions which were instrumental in the 2018-2019 protests against now ousted President Omar al-Bashir. Let's get you more on the situation in that country. I'm joined by a Sudanese and American international relations expert, Ms. Abiol Lual Deng. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Perhaps let's start with an update in terms of what is happening in the country. We do understand that the internet has been shut down, but there's allegedly an SMS that is doing the round that has been attributed to this group, the Sudanese Professional Association. What do you know about that?
Honestly, I'm like you. I'm also trying to verify from the sources that I know on the ground, like what's true and what's not. It's very difficult with the internet being cut, and particularly because there is a tendency for rumors to run around. I do know that the situation is not only it's quite fluid, but also I do know that it's at a stalemate still, despite intervention not only of Arab League. Mediation team, but specifically also the mediation team of South Sudan had made some progress last week, and yet we're still not at the end of this situation. We still have the situation in which the civil leaders of Sudan are jailed, and we're waiting to see what happens. And it has a lot of impact for the region.
Right. I would like for us, perhaps, just for the benefit of a viewer who has not been keeping up to date with developments in Sudan, how did we get here?
It's a very complicated story, and I think one of the things that, for me, as someone who is based in Africa, I'm in Dakar, Senegal right now, I think one of the things it's important to also remember that this is also an African story. There is a tendency to look at Sudan and Arabize it, and connected with the Arab Spring and the protests in the Middle East. But the reality is it's also very much an African story. And so how did we get here? Well, the country got rid of Bashir in successful protests. People got in the street and, went out for their rights, put in the temporary government came in place. And yet there was always a kind of dissatisfaction between the military and the military and the civil class, and also with very different things going on. There are people who are more pro-Islam, people who are less. There are people who are more pro-democracy, people who are less. And so this was kind of always a strange situation. They ended up having a peace deal negotiated by South Sudan, because South Sudan is always implicated in anything that goes on in Sudan. So, Juba Agreement. And unfortunately, it's being violated right now. And so the interests of Sudan, it's not just for South Sudan or not just for the Middle East, it's for the whole region. And that's what's going on right now. So you have Middle Eastern elements who are there, but you also have elements coming from Sudan, South Sudan as well. And I think the main thing, what I know from my sources on the ground, is they keep saying, I don't know why people in Africa are not paying more attention to this. This is an African issue. It's not just Al Jazeera, not just Arab issue. It's an African issue as well.
I'd like us to expand on that, right? It's an African issue. What has your assessment in terms of response from leaders, not just regionally, but across, the African continent, from bodies such as the African Union? Has enough attention been given to Sudan?
I think the African Union has done a great job. They have, definitely decried the situation that's going on. But the issue is that Sudan has often been associated with the Middle East. So people consider it to be, it reminds me of the Arab Spring, it reminds me of something just in North Africa. But Sudan is a country that is really a keystone in Africa. So anything that happens there has the capacity to influence all regions. I do not want to go too far, but I would say, when we see the situation of what's going on now in Ethiopia and the issues that are going on there, you cannot delink that from what's going on in Sudan. These are neighboring countries. And so this regional situation is an issue. Sudan has the capacity to influence problems in the Middle East, in North Africa, but also in Central Africa. There's a big border with Chad, also in South Sudan, also in Central African Republic, in Congo. So it's really a problem that what is needed by many people on the ground. I know they are telling me, please tell the East African community, for example, EAC or IGAD, which has always been a great negotiator, IGAD, in Sudan. They need more support. This is also an African situation in which there is a need for support worldwide, internationally, to support African bodies, African regional economic communities to help negotiate the peace. Because so far, for example, the South Sudan negotiation team has made some of the most progress, more than those coming from the Middle East. So we also need to start to look at Sudan as not only a problem or not only a situation in the Middle East, but a regional African and East of Africa situation as well.
You are from South Sudan, and
yes.
A lot of people, when they hear, oh, there's been a military coup on the continent, it's so far removed. I mean, a lot of people, they have not ever experienced that, right? So perhaps
yes.
if you could describe for us on the ground the impact that it has on the everyday person. You've got your family that is there, you're in Dakar right now, but your family is in South Sudan. Do you have fears about their well-being?
I mean, of course, I personally am in Dakar, but when the coup d'etat happened last week, I immediately was concerned because I have a half-sister who was normally based in Khartoum for a long time. She's no longer there, but I have many relatives, I have many cousins there. My family, you guys say, we say now we're South Sudanese, right? But this is a division that was made in 2011. The reality is I feel Sudanese, and actually the Prime Minister of Sudan, Abdel Hamdok, the person who is currently being detained, is someone who has been very pluralistic about Sudanese identity, not only being about ethnicity, talking about civic nationalism and going beyond that. So someone from South Sudan like me also feels Sudanese because the reality is like my ancestors also are from the north of Sudan. But now we make a division, so you have to go one side or the other. Okay, but I have family there. And they are obviously African identifying, they are Christian. It's not a good situation like what you had last week, the beginning of the week with the coup d'etat, in which you had what we call Janjaweed, which is the Islamists, running in the streets and shooting people in the head and stuff and creating problems. When there are situations like that, usually minorities get targeted. So it's scary. But I think beyond that, we also need to look at the implications of the fact that the Sudan as a country can collapse, and this was what the big fear for many people, including in the South, was last week, was that there might be a collapse of this country, because normally, if there's problem in the North, problem in the South, problem in the West, problem in the East. There are already many agreements that brought them to the table of the Juba Agreement. There's already many problems in the Darfur region as well. And now problems in the East, and the Ethiopian, Eritrean, and Tigray conflict is overlapping into Sudan. And so it's a South Sudanese issue. So it's not in a void, you know what I mean? And this is the big fear for people who come from the region of Africa where I come, is we're very scared. When we see what's going on now, we see that Sudan had 17th coup d'etat, which is not something that's very easy. It's quite scary. And also we're looking at Ethiopia and wondering, what can happen there. So for those of you who don't know what it's like to live in a situation of coup d'etat, it's extremely scary. I found myself in Juba in 2013 when the tentative of coup d'etat happened there, and it's, just everything is in flux, and you don't know how you're going to leave, and you don't know what happens next, So it's not great, for the population, and I think there is an issue when we look at the fact that Sudan has now had 17 coup d'etat. There's a problem, and I hope that as Africans can also begin to address in the African Union, address these issues. Why is this one region having so many problems of governance, and what support do they need, really,
And that's just it. Taking a look at what is behind this is quite important. Thank you for bringing to my attention, at least, that's how Sudanese people feel, that there's even though the country was divided into two, it's Sudan, and you are Sudanese, not just South Sudanese. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for your time and bringing us up to date with the situation in Sudan. Abiol Lual Deng is a Sudanese as well as an American international relations expert. Thank you.